Hi everyone, welcome to our video. We are Group7 and today we will talk about enterprise and social partners. For our presentation, we will have 4 parts. First is Russia situation, 2 is problem and solution, 3 is meaning and effect, and the last one is application. And now we will talk about Russia situation.
Russia before Vladimir Putin. Russia decided to choose the path of American-style liberal and democratic development in the hope of creating an era of robust development for Russia. The Russian government has implemented reforms under the so-called shock therapy. However, the actual results of shock therapy are quite the opposite. According to Chairman of the Russian State Asset Management Committee, the process of reforms in the 1990s while 250 large enterprises and factories of the Russian defense industry destroyed the industrial complex, national defense and significantly weakened the Russian armed forces, while thousands of modern industrial enterprises that were the pride of former Soviet Union and almost wiped Russian agriculture. By many economical indicators in the late 1990s, Russia was only on par with less developed countries like Zimbabwe or Honduras. In the political spheres, hundreds of non-governmental organizations appear in Russia to carry activities, bribery, manipulation, seduction, propaganda, and organization of sabotage activities. Especially the US and its allies have used terrorist organizations to intervene, causing a fraternal and mutual war in the Russian Autonomous Republic of Chechnya and a way of ethnic conflicts and secessions aimed at fighting the enemies, disintegrate Russia from within, prevent Russia from existing as a sovereign state. Thus, after nearly 10 years of implementing reforms under shock therapy, Russia has fallen into a comprehensive social, economic, political, and defense crisis. According to a summary of Russian Statistical Office, Russia's economic loss after 10 years of this reform is 2.5 times greater than the Soviet Union's loss in World War II. However, the rate damage much more serious than the economic damage to Russia is that the people fall into a complete crisis of ideological awareness and lost faith when the model of real socialism in the Soviet Union was completely collapsed. Russia after Vladimir Putin. The first merit of Vladimir Putin after taking office in early 2000 was determining the path of building and developing the new Russia. That path was outlined in a very important article by Putin titled that Russia on the threshold of entering the new millennium. In this article, Putin reveals the basic content of the thesis on Russian national thought and the basic tasks that orient Russia development, but in the future on the basis of lessons learned, the experience of Russia from thousands of years of history, also in the Soviet period, inheriting the traditional good values in history. Russia under the rule of Putin has chosen a model of development of a social-oriented market economy with state management, according to which economic development under the market mechanism is closely associated with meeting the increasing social needs of the people.
And continue the video, we will talk about solution and result.
When Vladimir Putin came to the building, everyone seemed to panic at his sudden appearance, and all of them ran like cockroaches. When hearing of his arrival in town, His Saudi's activity had so many problems for the factory owner, and he started to solve the problem. The activity of Putin to solve the problem, unlike Medvedev, Putin coming from the factory owner that things to show that his spirit and firm. We can see through his eye when he in the meeting to solve the problem in the factory with factory owners. Condemn and oppose the action of the factory owners in hiring workers with the number in 5,000 of life and using them as slaves. The factory owner just want to satisfy their ambition in compassion, infinite greed. With his decision, he is ready to punish the factory owner's mistake by restructuring all of the factory without hesitation. His words clear and firm when he stated that he could still run the factories without them, and he requested them to sign the pledge to restructure the factory, include billionaires Ole Diri Pascal. Sometimes the seasoned and dictatorship of a person are essential to finding a positive solution to revive the spirit of personal all countries.
And next, we will talk about result of the reform.
About economy, his great achievement during his time in charge of Russia was to change the face of the economy and improve the quality of life of the people. The economy was nearly double in size. The number of people living below the poverty line has been halved. At the time of Putin's first term in office, Russia had only 12 billion in foreign exchange reserve with high public debt, equivalent to 92.1% of GDP. However, all numbers have changed dramatically over the past 20 years as Russia's public debt is now down to just 15.4% of GDP, and foreign exchange reserves have risen above 500 billion threshold. Russia's gold reserves have increased by nearly 600% since 2000. The Central Bank of Russia bought 8.8 million ounces of gold, increasing its gold reserve to 67.9 million ounces. The agency also confirmed that Russia's total gold reserve alone reached 100.3 billion USD on July 1, 2019. Buying gold is part of Putin's long-term plan. Gold reserves have elevated Russia's position and reduced the negative impact of the US monetary system and the European Union. About the social security, during the 2000s, Russia's population continued to decline due to a decrease in a natural birth rate and a sharp decrease in the number of young deaths. Our population is decreasing by almost 1 million people every year. However, things have completely changed over the past 2 decades, but we have reserved this trend. We even achieved the rate of natural population growth, Putin said.
Putin stunned the world by being the first major power to criticize U.S. foreign policy and the initiative for a unipolar world dominated by the U.S. at the 2007 Munich Security Conference. In 2014, Putin had made Western countries not in time when he approved a referendum in Crimea, thereby annexing the peninsula to Russia. Although this caused Russia's economy to suffer sanctions from the US and Europe, Mr. Putin's bravery was clearly demonstrated in the way he steered and managed to bring Russia through the difficulties posed by Western sanctions. 6 years ago, in September 2015, Russia suddenly deployed troops to Syria at the request of its President Bashar al-Assad, marking the first time Russia participated in a large-scale military operation abroad. After just over 2 years, President Putin announced that with the help of the Russian military, The Syrian armed forces had liberated almost all of Syria from terrorists. Many international experts say that the victory in Syria is a gift that President Putin gives Russia in all three fields of economy, politics, and military. In particular, it is the most concrete affirmation of Russia's role in the international arena.
Continue, we will talk about meaning and effect. First is economic. Change the face of the economy and improve the quality of life of the people, embracing numbers. Social security. During the 2000s, Russia's population continued to decline. Achieving the rate of natural population growth over the past 2 decades. Political. President Putin is the figure that brings Russia back to the key position at the international negotiating table, a powerful force in the multipolar world. Conclude. There is still no figure that can be considered equal to Mr. Putin in the leadership of the countries. And the last one is application.
Countering Western influence. In 2016, the Russian government decided to ban the activities of the Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the International Republic Institute, and more than 90 non-government organizations. One of the main reasons is the interference in the Russian internal affairs by some Ngos. One of the main causes of the Ngos bomb recent years is funding from the West governments. During his second term, Putin had carried out of the reform of the outlet army focus, and the process after the brief war with the Georgia, Putin has established a focus capable of the relatively quickly respond, but some advantage of military equipment such as the stealth fighters and the next generation tanks are still in the development stage. The situation in the focus arm project is also not very smooth. Related with NATO, Putin has advised this NATO as well as sanctions is the threat to the Moscow Asia's axis. Putin has recent years promoted economic and military cooperation with the Asian countries whose economies need Russian energy.
Now we move to some examples. President Vladimir Putin has been very strong and determined to revive a Russia that is on the verge of collapse. It's a Russia's economic developments, in particular, and comprehensiveness in general in the early 21st century, that's a clearest demonstration of the successful of the reforms. So many countries has adopted dictatorships to help their country be more stable and developed. Here are two typical countries that has successfully applied Putin method to develop the country. In 1979, North Korea was considered a modernized standard country. The remarkable economic development has caused North Korea's GDP per capita, life expectancy, and literacy rate to increase rapidly. The social welfare regime of North Korea at that time was also quite high. In 1979, it comprehensively implemented free education and free public health, providing all the necessary items such as jackets, umbrella, garments, and shoes for subjects from preschool children, elementary school students to college students. The distribution of social wealth is fairly uniform. North Korea, by adopting strong policies in management in all aspects, North Korea's life and economy has grown even more prosperous. In 1953, North Korea was just a post-war wreckage. Infrastructure was destroyed. Factories and construction facilities were badly damaged by bombs. Soldiers and civilians suffered serious casualties and lack labor. 10 years after the end of the Korean War, The average growth rate of the economy of the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea is up to 25% per year. In the late of 1960s, the entire rural People Democratic Republic of North Korea has a power rise. In the late 1970s, the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea was self-sufficient in food production. In the early 1980s, 70% of controlled arable land and irrigated, 95% of sowing and 70% of harvesting were mechanic. In 1984, for the first time, North Korean total food production reached 10 million tons, meeting domestic food demand and partial exports. The industrial economy is also growing at very fast pace. In 2004, North Korean agriculture reached about 4.25 tons of food. Mining increased by 21.3%. Hydropower increased by 17%. In 2005, agricultural production reached about 4.8 million tons of food. In 2006, it was 4 million tons, and in 2015, it was 5.4 million tons. China. Thanks to top deterrent methods, China has also successfully prevented its almost collapsed economy. When the Communist Party first started leading China, it was very, very poor. DBS Jeff's economic risk long stays. Over the past 40 years, China has introduced a series of landmark market reforms to open up trade routes and investment flows, eventually pulling hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. After Mao Zedong's death in 1976, then serving reform began to reshape the economy. Farmers are granted the right to farm on their own land, providing living conditions and easy food security. The doors were opened for foreign investment when the U.S. and China reestablished diplomatic relations in 1979, eager to take advantage of cheap labor and low rent costs. Many began to point. Since then, China has become a world factory. By 1985, they had reached $25 billion in less than 2 decades. Later, exports were worth $4.3 million, making China the world's largest trade exporter. Economic reform has improved the fortune of hundreds of millions of Chinese people. The World Bank says more than 850 million people have lived out of poverty, and the country is on track to eradicate absolute poverty by 2020. At the same time, the rate of education has skyrocketed. Standard Chartered forecast that by 2030, about 27% of China's workforce will have university degrees, the same as Germany today.
That's all. Thank you for your listening and watching.